Lith kept running. From time to time, he would turn his head and, using light vision, check if the Rye was following him.
There's no trace of it, but you can't be too careful. I'm afraid I've made the thing very angry. It's better to keep my distance and let it be for the time being.
He got out of the woods and could see Celia's house. Then, he finally remembered the magical stone in his pocket. He took it out and activated light vision to get a closer look at the object. The first thing he noticed was that the stone's rough edges had been smoothed out. Its surface was still rough, but it now looked more like marble. The buzzing sound had also stopped, and the levels of the stone's life force had changed significantly. When he first saw the stone, its life force was like a candle about to burn out, whereas now it glowed like a steady flame. However, warning Celia about the Rye was the top priority. He hid the stone in a leathery pouch he always carried around his neck and knocked at the door. Once inside, Lith explained everything to her. He described in detail the size and power of the beast, leaving her in complete shock. But he never mentioned the fight. Lith told Celia how he had fled as soon as he was able, and that he had only gotten away thanks to his magic. He showed her his tattered sleeves as proof.
Good gods, kid.
After all this time, she still refused to call him by his name.
You were really lucky it didn't chase you. If it had, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But thanks for warning me instead of going straight to your parents,
she said, ruffling his hair.
How did you know I came here first? Because if you hadn't, your parents would have already locked you up in your house, and one of them would have come here to warn me instead.
Lith was grateful for his quick thinking. Being locked up would have been worse than being torn apart by any Rye.
You're right. It would have been better not to tell them. Otherwise my hunting days will be over. Exactly. I suggest you take the rest of the morning off. Make up an excuse for those sleeves and go home.
She then walked over to the shed next to her house where she kept her game.
Take these as a thank you for the heads up,
she said, handing him a rabbit and a blinker.
I was about to go into the woods, but I think I'll just continue tanning the remaining pelts I have and travel in the afternoon when it should be safe, she said.
Lith was very grateful. He knew how precious meat was in Lutia, even for a huntress as good as Celia. He was happy he'd come to see her first instead of going to his parents. Disaster averted. After he left Celia's, he spent the rest of the morning trying to understand how to use the magic stone. It appeared to be feeding off his mana, but not in a parasitic way. More like absorbing the mana he naturally released. The stone would simply breathe in whatever Lith's body breathed out. Lith tried injecting additional mana into it, but it didn't work. He also tried casting elemental spells while holding the stone to check if it improved in any way, but there were no changes. The stone looked just like any other.
Stones don't have a clear mana flow, and they don't have any life force. Maybe this thing needs time to heal or recharge. The Rye messed it up quite badly. Let's hope it's not broken. It doesn't look dangerous, so I'll keep it a while longer. Maybe it's some kind of treasure. I bet I can find something about it in one of Nana's books. I just have to be patient.
The last days of autumn went by and winter arrived again. Having recently turned 5 years old, Lith revealed a little more about his magic talents, making himself invaluable to his family. He would be the first to wake up and warm up the whole house using magic, including the floors. Then, Raz would light the fireplace, giving the whole house a cozy feeling. The family would gather around the fireplace as part of their traditions. Lith was even entrusted with cooking. Alina would prepare the meal, and Lith would cook it faster and better than any fireplace. He'd even keep the soup warm for everyone. And although he could not go hunting because of the bad weather and because his parents forbade him, he was allowed to go to Celia's house and do some house chores for her. Now that she had Lith, Celia had become very lazy and dependent on him for keeping her house clean and her tools sterilized. But this worked perfectly for Lith. He could go and fetch some of his private meat whenever he got hungry, and could also get money from Celia for doing the house chores. Lith wasn't interested in money, and would have done the chores for free, but his parents insisted that he get paid. So, Celia gave him a few copper coins for cleaning the house, and some more for Alina to do her laundry. Both Alina and Raz welcomed the extra income, especially because doing laundry for 8 instead of 7 wasn't much of a difference. Lith provided them with an endless supply of hot water. During the first few weeks of winter, Lith made a very important breakthrough. He finally understood how to use invigoration to scan other bodies. He was now able to let his mana get into another person's body and slowly take control of their mana flow. It allowed Lith to know everything about the person's physical condition. The only way to achieve that result was to make physical contact and let his mana search for paths to get into another person's body without harming them. Lith immediately used his new ability on Tista, and his findings were very discouraging. Her body was of the tar-like substance that he now called impurities. They were coming from her lungs. Only a small portion of Tista's lungs was still made up of healthy tissue. Most of the tissue looked like a black mass that was actively producing more impurities. These impurities had spread throughout her body. At first, these impurities only made her cough, but as they increased in number, her condition deteriorated to the point that she developed pneumonia. After giving it some thought, Lith was sure he'd found a better solution to Tista's problems. But it was an embarrassing process, and even though his real age was 30, he was trapped in the body of a 5-year-old child. That made it extremely uncomfortable to talk about certain matters, especially with the women in his family. After taking some deep breaths, he called Raz and Alina to discuss the new solution and to ask for their help and permission. He had to put it in simple terms to make them understand.
I can't cure Tista, at least not yet. However, I think I found a way that should make her feel much better. In fact, it could potentially get rid of most of her symptoms.
And if it doesn't work? Raz asked.
Then she will remain the same. But I need you to trust me.
Lith had been wrong in thinking that his parents would oppose him. In fact, they had no objections and didn't ask any questions. They trusted Lith's ability to use magic, and believed that he had the best intentions for his sister. So Lith proceeded with his experiment. The first phase was to take control of Tista's mana flow and overload her body with his own mana. Then, he would force the impurities to move away from her inner organs and go toward her skin. During this part, Tista felt hot the whole time, as if she had a mild fever, but it was all part of the process. The tricky part came afterward. Once most of the impurities were about to surface, Tista had to go into a wash tub. For this part, Lith had demanded to be blindfolded. He was still a man in the body of a boy, and didn't think it would be appropriate to stare at a naked girl. Once Tista got into the wash tub, the impurities started to wash off her body. The stench was horrible, but because it was winter, they couldn't open the windows to ventilate the house. The cold was Tista's worst enemy. Lith used water magic to extract all the impurities and then created and manipulated flows that massaged Tista's body. Then he destroyed the impurities using dark magic. It was a difficult process that required him to use water and dark magic at the same time, all while keeping invigoration active. After the treatment was done, he used water magic to clean her thoroughly, and then he mixed fire and wind magic to create a makeshift hairdryer. When the process was complete, Tista looked rejuvenated. It was like she had just come back from a spa, whereas Lith looked like he had just got back from a hard day in the mines. He was drenched in sweat and out of breath.
How do you feel?
He asked her. Tista took several deep breaths.
I've never felt so good. I can actually breathe. That was the best bath I've ever taken in my life. Thank you for everything, little brother.
She tried to hug him, but he raised his hands to stop her.
No hugs right now. I'm disgusting and you're so clean. I need a bath, some food, and 2 hours of rest if not more.
Alina and Reyna, who had witnessed the whole ordeal, nodded in agreement.
Lith, dear, what was that thing that you did with the water?
Alina asked.
Do you mean...
He tried to find a word for hydromassage or jacuzzi, but couldn't find any and was too tired to try.
The water massage?
He finished.
Yes, that one. It seems so relaxing. Tista even fell asleep many times during the treatment. It must have felt very pleasant,
Alina said.
And that thing for drying her hair. Could you do that again, too?
Rena said expectantly. Lith understood what they were getting at.
Are you saying that you would like a hot water massage?
They both nodded enthusiastically.
But...
Lith stuttered. He was trying to find a way to get out of the situation. He didn't feel comfortable looking at his mom and sister naked. All they saw was a 5-year-old boy, but they didn't know he was well past puberty. It seemed wildly inappropriate.
We've dreamed of being able to take a bath as a family during the winter without catching a cold or worse. The stench we get from working in the barn is unbearable,
Alina said.
Sometimes the stench is so bad we can't even sleep at night. What do you say? Would you help us?
Rena said pleadingly. Lith gave up. He couldn't tell them the truth.
Fine. Let me rest for a little while and I'll make a bath for you. But I still need to be blindfolded. I demand that.
Alina and Rena laughed.
Why do you insist on being blindfolded?
Alina said.
We're a family. There's nothing to be ashamed about.
Lith thought of something to say, but the only word that came out was
decorum.
Alina and Rena shrugged but nodded. Lith sighed. It was going to be a long winter.